Hey everyone, today we're going to be showing you how to install the SuperATV rear disc brake conversion kit for Honda Utility ATVs. Now the reason so many people are installing these on their machines is 1, you're getting better stopping power, 2, easier to maintain, and 3, if you have some serious issues with your drum brakes, this might be the cheaper options. So with that being said, we're doing it on the Honda Foreman 450, but it's going to fit 300s all the way to 650s. You do want to verify fitment on our website. Just type in your year, make, and model, but typically it's going to be the 4-wheel drive models with the 12-inch rear wheel, the steel rear wheel. That said, we're just using common hand tools to install it. It's pretty simple to do. Let's get started. So right here we have everything laid out in the kit. It comes with all the hardware, the disc and hub. You've got some brackets, O-ring, a bearing carrier, and that rear caliper with the pads already installed. To get this done, we're using wrenches and sockets ranging from 10 to 15 millimeters. Then I also have a 30 millimeter socket. We're using a breaker bar. We also have a torque wrench, dead blow hammer, 6 millimeter Allen, needle nose pliers. I also have digital calipers, rubber gloves, safety glasses, rags, contact cleaner, some grease, and we're also going to be using some 600 grit sandpaper to help clean up a few blemishes. So if you need the kit itself or contact cleaner, grease, things like that, we've got those things on our website. Just click the link in the description below. First thing we're going to do is loosen up this axle nut. So I'm going to undo the cotter pin. We're going to use a 30 millimeter socket to loosen this up. So we're not going to take it all the way off yet. There is a chance that your brakes don't work if you're doing this job. Ours still work right now, so we can set our parking brake and get it loosened with the wheel still on the ground. If that's not the case for you, what you can do is raise the wheel off the ground. You're going to use a pry bar between the studs and loosen that up. After that, you want to raise the rear of the machine off the ground. You're going to want to use a jack and jack stands or a jack that locks in place. Then go ahead and remove your wheel. We're using a 17 millimeter socket. And from here, I'm going to go ahead and remove that axle nut all the way. After that, we're going to remove these wing nuts for the cables. We'll free those up from this lever. And if these wing nuts are real corroded, you can spray a little bit of penetrating oil on them. It'll help you out. And as you pull the cables out, keep track of these spacers. We're going to slide these cables all the way through this bracket. There's a spring, keep track of that. And then we're going to remove the 4 nuts that are holding on the brake drum assembly, and we'll slide the whole thing off. And towards the front, we have this brake line vent hose. You can cut it off or just disconnect it like us. And to slide that off, you're going to have to pay attention to the location of this arm. Next step, we want to clean up these old parts just a little bit. At least the parts that are still on the machine. So axle and that little flange. Okay, with that good, I'm going to take the bearing assembly. I'm going to apply some grease inside the seal on that lip. A little extra grease is better than none, since I know you guys aren't coming back in here anytime soon. We're also going to apply just a little bit to this O-ring. And then there's that groove in the bearing assembly. Stick it in there, and then I'm also going to apply a little bit of grease to this axle shaft. You don't need a ton, but I'm going to make sure we have some in those splines. Don't want anything seizing on here. Now that bearing fits a little tight right there. You might have to work it on just like I did. And I'm just going to verify. I'm going to take a look at this O-ring. Make sure it's still in position. So with that looking good, we'll push it on the rest of the way. The next step is to install the cable bracket. Now, something with the cable bracket, you'll notice that the upper hole is larger than the bottom one. So that's actually going to be for the foot brake cable. So the one coming from the handbrake, slide that in on the bottom, foot brake on top. Just make sure they fit in their place all the way. Now we're going to take one of the bigger bolts that came in the kit. You're going to go through the flange on the bearing assembly and the flange on the axle housing. Then we're going through the bracket for the cables. Then install one of the supplied nylock nuts on the back side. The same hardware on the bottom mounting location. And then in the back we have this brake caliper mount. So you want to make sure you have it in the correct orientation. I'm going to flip this upside down. So with this sitting here just like that, the bend is going towards the outside of the machine. We'll just install the remaining larger bolts and the nylock nuts. And I'm not going to tighten these down all the way. I'm going to get them close to tight just to take up some of this slop. Now this next step you don't have to do, but I'm going to do it just to make sure I don't get any water inside the axle, and I don't want anything seizing up with that bearing, anything like that. So this powder coat right here, ours actually has a few little bubbles on it, and I want to smooth that out just so it doesn't damage that seal. So I'm going to take just the 600 grit sandpaper, just smooth them out real quick. So you just want to feel for any high spots, get those gone. You want to make sure you don't have any oil or protective coating or anything on this disc. So I'm going to take a clean rag and a little brake cleaner or contact cleaner and wipe it off. We've already got our grease on the axle and that seal. So we can go ahead and install the disc assembly. Just make sure you line it up with the splines. From here we can reinstall the axle nut. We're just going to hand tighten it. Now for the cable bracket, you want to put the springs back on those cables. We've got the spacers that are going through this bracket, and keep in mind the flat side of this bracket is going to be towards the outside of the machine. And I just want to point out these spacers that go into it, you want them to be able to move around in there freely. So ours is kind of hanging up right here, and if that's the case with yours, you might have to use a round file, maybe just even file down that powder coat a little bit. So if you had to do much filing, you can use a paint pen so these don't rust just inside of there. And we're going to put the spacers in there, feed the cable through. And then you want to thread these wing nuts on a few threads. Now for the brake caliper, I'm going to pull the pad spacer out. And as we mount this up, we're going to use the supplied spacers. These are going to go between the mounting bracket and the caliper mount. And then we're just using two of the shorter bolts with the lock washer on them. We're coming through the back side of the mounting bracket. So I'm going to push this piston in just a little bit, free up some room. Should be able to slide on the rotor nice and easy, just like that. We've got the bolt with lock washer, the spacer, and going into that bracket. And then we'll just do the same thing for the lower mounting location. And again, I'm not going to tighten these up, I'm just going to get them close. Now on the back side of the caliper, we've got this helix that has a bolt and a nut on it. So to remove this, you're going to rotate that. If you're looking down the top, you'd be rotating that clockwise. Pull straight out. So for some reason, the instructions have us remove the bolt that's in there. And another bolt came in this kit, so we're just going to swap those out. This is where things can get tricky. Take the helix, line that hex side of it up with this arm for the cables. And we're going all the way in with this bolt. And you want to make sure the bolt is sticking out of here 2.5 millimeters. We're using our caliper to measure that, but if all you had was an Allen key or something like that, that's 2.5 millimeters wide, that'll get you by. So we are 2.5 right there. That's where we want to be. Now here comes the tricky part. You don't want to move that bolt anymore. And this is going to rotate in the arm. So we need to connect this back to the caliper. And it rotates in place, and it's going to rotate. The rotation is going to be counterclockwise. So you want to make sure the bolt is rotating with that brass piece. So we're all the way in right there. It's as far as I can rotate it. Now we need to align this bracket arm up. So for us, it slides right on right there. But if you needed to loosen up these cables or whatever, you can. And this arm, it's pretty vertical right here. It's maybe tipped forward just a little bit, but it's not like these cables are sticking out the end. So that's where it's going to be on ours. I'm going to temporarily tighten that nut by hand for now. Then from here, we can do all of the final tightening on all of the hardware. And just so you guys know, this is set up. If you ever want to add a master cylinder and a hydraulic line, you can. But if you're not going to, make sure you tighten up that banjo bolt just so no dirt gets in there. We're going to install the wheel, and we're going to torque this axle nut. Make sure you get that cotter pin put back in place. If the slots in the nut don't line up, you always want to tighten until they do. And once you have everything tightened down, you can set the free play in your levers. So you're going to do that for both the brake lever and the brake pedal. Now to get this adjusted up, you have two adjustments down here. So if you need big adjustments, that nut that we hand tightened, you could back that off and you can screw that bolt in. If you go clockwise, this arm is going to get tight further back. If you go counterclockwise with it, it's going to get tight further forward. So we want to be somewhat close to straight up and down. I'm going to try to put it back where it was with that 2.5 millimeters on the end of the helix. And we'll adjust the wing nuts till we're in spec on the levers. Each machine is going to be a little bit different. Just make sure you have some free play. Use the spec in your manual and make sure that you don't have any drag on the brakes with the rear wheels raised off the ground. So I've raised the rear wheels off the ground. This rotates freely. You can hear the pads rubbing against the disc right there, but there's not a significant amount of drag. We have the correct free play in our levers. So from here, we can go ahead and tighten down our jam nut. We're going to hold the bolt so it doesn't move at that point. And you can see our adjusters, we're almost all the way through the start of the threads on the cable. And that's about where you want to be. If you have a ton sticking out, or if the ends of the threads of the cable aren't towards the end of these wing nuts right here, that's when you can loosen this up and adjust the whole arm forward or back for the engagement point. And then last thing, if these don't want to return, you may need to look into the cables themselves, see if the cables are binding up. There's a chance you might be able to lube the cables. In other scenarios, you might have to replace them completely. And that's it for installing the SuperATV rear disc brake conversion kit on your Honda Utility ATV. If you have any questions, leave those down in the comments. And again, if you need this kit, it's available on our website. We've got tools, cleaners, chemicals, things like that on our website as well. So you're gonna wanna pick those up. We offer free shipping on orders over $75, so take advantage of that and subscribe to our channel for more helpful content. I'm Charles with Rocky Mountain ATV MC. Thanks for watching.